Support comes from Missouri Forest Products Association, committed to sustainable and sound conservation of the state's forests, which support more than 41,000 Missouri jobs, resulting in a $10 billion industry. ChooseWood.com.
Welcome to St. Louis on the Air. I'm Emily Woodbury, in for Sarah Fensky. Last week, the Illinois Department of Natural Resources announced 12 sites in the state that were added to the National Register of Historic Places during 2019. This past year's list includes everything from a Leaning Tower of Pisa replica in Cook County to the Alton Gas and Electric Powerhouse constructed in 1913. Joining me now to go through the list is Amy Hathaway. She's a National Register and Survey Specialist for Illinois' State Historic Preservation Office. Amy, welcome to the show.
Oh, thanks for having me.
So let's jump right into the history of some of these places. I mentioned the Alton Gas and Electric Powerhouse in Madison County that was constructed in 1913. And I understand this was a pretty innovative power plant during its time.
It was. Actually, it is listed for its association with industry, and it's a relatively new, for the time, hydroelectric powered power plant. So they received the electricity was remotely received, water powered through the Keokuk Dam in Iowa, and it also produced coal.
And what
Oh, sorry.
Oh no, go ahead. I was just going to say, what was its impact in Alton during the time? What did it bring to that city?
Well, it brought power, and of course, water power at the time was relatively new, and it was, I believe, less expensive and also cleaner.
Mm-hmm. So, what comes with this National Register of Historic Places designation? For this old power plant, what does this recognition change?
Well, basically, what I tell people about the National Register is it's really an honorific designation. And we have a set of criteria, and we have a way of evaluating these. And it is a federal program, so it goes all the way to the National Park Service. They make the final say. But it's really having an outside validation of a property's significance, because we have a tendency to become very attached to things in our community or elsewhere that have emotional attachment to them. And so this is kind of a dispassionate account of why it's important, and I think that it helps elevate its significance in the way that, see, it's not just us that love this property. This is something that's really important and worthy of preservation.
Mm-hmm. Also on the list is the Hunziker Winery site in Warsaw. I hope I'm saying that right. Is it the Hunziker Winery site?
That's the way I say it.
Okay. This is a little over 30 miles north of Quincy. And I believe this is the oldest site on the 2019 list. It dates back to the mid-1800s. Tell me about this.
Well, this is the other thing we list. In addition to, we think of buildings listed in the National Register, we also list archaeological sites. And this is something that it's considered a ruin. It's underground, largely underground. There was a wine house above it, but it was listed, archaeology, we list things really for what they may tell us, and this was considered important for what it might tell us about the wine industry and winemaking at the time.
So I see in a photo, it's actually, so there is a little bit of an above-ground ruin, but you're saying most of the interesting aspect of this is this underground cellar that was used for wine production.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing when you look at it and how well intact it is underground. When you look at the above ground, it kind of does look like not much, but underneath, it's the engineering that went into that is remarkable.
So what does this property tell us about, mid-19th century wine production in Western Illinois?
Well, that's something that the expert consultant can probably offer more information to than I could. We help people with the process, and this nomination was something that I didn't personally work on, but it was, it kind of was like what was stored in there, and a little bit more about, wine production at the time, I mean, it's still going on now.
Mm-hmm. Well, and perhaps this is something we'll have to look into for a future show. It sounds very interesting.
I don't think it would be a problem to look in the history of wine and winemaking. I think that would be kind of fun. Mm-hmm. But it talks about like some of their conclusions were, I guess they called it kind of a wine frenzy at that time, which I thought was kind of an interesting way to put it. But, how to determine the quality of the wine and all of these things in the manufacturing. So there are all sorts of things in this nomination that talk about it in the production. So, and of course there are a lot of, German settlements in the area, and still to this day in that area and across on your side of the river, a lot of wine production.
Let's travel a bit farther north to a very unique structure situated in Cook County, just outside of Chicago. In the city of Niles, there's a Leaning Tower of Pisa replica. It's called the Leaning Tower of Niles, and I believe it's about half the size of the original in Italy.
Yeah.
How did this come about?
Well, believe it or not, this was actually once in a very large park that the owner built he had a company in Chicago, and of ventilating fans companies, and I believe he was also a German immigrant. Now, come to think of it, and he started his own business, and he was very, very good to his employees, and he built this park. And the park had, lakes and pools, and this water tower was needed to, for having those pools and lakes there. And he didn't like the looks of it, from what I understand, and so he put it in this Leaning Tower replica. And I don't think anyone really knows why he picked the Leaning Tower. I know he was interested in science, and certainly interested in Italian history and Italian scientists. So they thought, well, that might be. Since it was privately owned, and the city was behind nominating this property. They prepared the application, and the city employee pointed out, since it was private, there wasn't a lot of paperwork that they could find on it, on actually the reasoning, the rationale behind it. But it is remarkable, and it has bells. I think there's 5 bells, and 3 of them are actually from Italy. One is from the 16th century, and one is from the 17th century.
Oh, wow. That's incredible.
Exactly. And we're like, well, how did this come to be? And we really don't. There's a lot of questions about it, as far as we don't know how this got there. But it's fascinating, and we listed it for its architecture. There's a style of architecture called mimetic or programmatic architecture, and one of the characteristics of that is replicas of monuments like the Statue of Liberty or something like that. So that's why this was listed.
How did these sites come to your attention? What is the process of getting on this list?
Well, there's all different ways. Some people, like, for example, the city of Niles, it is recognition-based, and a lot of us come to us. We don't go out and have people apply. People come to us. We're government, and so we some people probably wouldn't want the government coming and knocking on their door saying, do you want this listed in a federal program? So they come to us, either, this was a city and it was kind of to help promote the property. It was something they thought was very important to the community. Hunziker Winery, the archaeological site, was owned actually by the Department of Natural Resources. They're the ones who were behind that. There are tax incentives for properties that are income producing, for properties listed in the National Register. Sometimes that's the reason why people come to us. I would say, though, largely they're people who are interested in their community and in their history, or in the property itself, and want that designation that says it's important, that validation. again, it goes all the way to the Park Service. We're just the staff people, with our feet on the ground doing the Park Service's work, and we do the process. We have a state review board that looks at it, and they only meet 3 times a year. And then it goes to the Park Service. So it can take, at a minimum, if everything's going great, 6 months. It could take to a year or even longer to get something listed.
So for those listening who would like to recommend a place in their area, I'm wondering, what are some qualities that make for a good pitch? What are you looking for
in
this pitch?
I know. We have 4 criteria, essentially. We look at properties, and properties could be any, buildings. It could be a bridge. It could be a water tower, like the Leaning Water Tower. It could be archaeology. So there's a whole bunch of things that they have a man-made component to it. And they have significance, so they're important for either their history, their architecture, archaeology, or their potential to yield information, or they're also like a grouping, like a part of a district. So, a lot of downtowns have commercial districts that are, they're older commercial districts. A lot of times they'll push to get those listed in the National Register, because then those property owners might get tax credits to do that. Properties also have to have integrity. We look at why is the property important, and does it have enough of those characteristics that made it important still intact? Properties are generally 50 years or older. We do have exceptions to the rules. If it's less than 50 years old, it has to be exceptionally significant, because the 50-year rule gives us context. And, something that's important today might not be important in a few years. So that's why there's this time. But then there are sites like, for example, what happened in 9/11, 2001. We have that site is listed in the National Register. We all know the significance of that. It doesn't need the passage of time.
Amy Hathaway is a National Register and Survey Specialist for Illinois State Historic Preservation Office. Amy, thank you so much for talking with me.
Oh, thanks again for having us.
And I should mention, if you are curious to see some of the sites that Amy and I were just talking about, the Illinois Department of Natural Resources has provided us with some photos, and you can see them on our Twitter feed right now and on our website at stlpublicradio.org. This is St. Louis on the Air on St. Louis Public Radio, 90.7 KWMU.
Support comes from Missouri Forest Products Association, committed to sustainable and sound conservation of the state's forests, which support more than 41,000 Missouri jobs, resulting in a $10 billion industry. ChooseWood.com.
St. Louis Public Radio's The Gateway gives you the day's news first thing every weekday morning. From the ever-evolving relationship between St. Louis City and County to developments in the Missouri and Illinois state capitals and reports from our correspondents in Rolla and the Metro East. We put it all in a roughly 10-minute package with clarity and context. Download The Gateway wherever you get podcasts.